You ever wake up to find your prize-winning pumpkins missing, only to spot them an hour later, baked into pies, at your neighbor's bake sale with your name still faintly sharpened on the bottom of one? Yeah, that was my morning. It had started like every other crisp autumn day around here, cool air, warm cider, and the smell of pumpkin spice wafting from every kitchen but mine. My kitchen smelled like something else entirely: hard work, sweat, and sheer determination. See, I don't just grow pumpkins, I grow the pumpkins. The kind that make old farmers tip their hats in respect, the kind that kids beg to take pictures with. My pumpkins have won the county fair's pie contest 3 years running, and this year, I had my biggest, most glorious patch yet. With the fair only a week away, I was already picturing that blue ribbon hanging right over the fireplace, next to Granddad's. But dreams have a funny way of curdling when a certain someone gets involved. And that someone? Karen. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. The kind of woman who power walks with laminated community bylaws and has never met a no trespassing sign she didn't consider optional. She was always sniffing around looking for excuses to find me, untrimmed hedges, excessive rural aesthetic, whatever that means. I could handle that. What I couldn't handle was theft. That morning, coffee still in hand, I strolled out to my pumpkin patch, ready to give my prized beauties their daily pep talk. Instead, I found half the patch gone. Clean cuts at the stems. Wheelbarrow tracks leading right under a gaping hole in my fence, like some cartoon villain had struck in the night. My jaw hit the dirt faster than a sack of fertilizer. I stood there, blinking at the emptiness, half expecting the pumpkins to just pop back into existence. Spoiler, they didn't. Now, I'd love to tell you I calmly assessed the situation, took stock, and filed a polite complaint. But no. I stormed straight over to Karen's bake sale, still in my pajamas, boots caked in mud, fury boiling hotter than a July sun. And there they were, pies. Row after row of them. Massive, golden pumpkin pies so big and perfect, there was only one place they could have come from. My patch. I knew those pumpkins like a mother knows her child's face. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I spotted the faint Sharpie mark I used to number my prize pumpkins. Right there, on the bottom of a pie tin. Karen stood behind the table, flashing that fake hi neighbor smile, the same one she always wore when she was up to no good. Oh, these? She chirped when I asked, her voice syrupy sweet. I just found some extras near the woods. Thought they were wild. Wild? Who in their right mind would believe a perfectly manicured row of record-sized pumpkins, inside a fenced and posted patch, was just wild? But Karen didn't blink. She knew exactly what she'd done. And just like that, every single pumpkin pie on that table wasn't just dessert. They were stolen property. The problem? The whole town flocks to Karen's bake sale. It's the big fall fundraiser for the HOA, the kind of event where people show up with cash and leave with gossip. It wasn't just about the pies. It was about principle. About pride. About the fact that Karen had pulled one over on me, smiling the whole time, and was about to walk away with not just my pumpkins, but the glory, the praise, and who knows how much money. The unfairness of it burned worse than the time I accidentally set my garden shed on fire trying to smoke out a wasp nest. I stood there, stunned, listening to people rave about how fresh the pies tasted, how local the pumpkins must be. I could practically hear Karen's smug thoughts, how she'd outfoxed me, how I couldn't prove a thing, how I'd just have to swallow it like a big ol' slice of humble pie. Well, Karen underestimated just how stubborn I could be. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't flip the tables, though I dreamed about it for a hot second. No. I smiled, tipped my hat, and walked away. Because if Karen wanted to turn this into a bake sale war, I wasn't going to fight fair. Not this time. The county fair was still a week away. But revenge? Revenge was coming sooner. And it was going to taste like pumpkin. I thought about flipping those tables for a hot second, but instead I just smiled, tipped my hat, and walked away. Because if Karen wanted to turn this into a bake sale war, well, I wasn't going to fight fair. Not this time. The county fair might have been a week away, but revenge? Revenge was coming sooner. And it was going to taste like pumpkin. Back at the farm, I stood in the middle of my half-empty patch, the fury cooling into something slower, sharper. Karen thought she'd won. Thought all it took was a pair of garden shears and a rolling pin to steal the glory. But what she didn't realize was that a farm teaches you things, real things. Patience. Planning. The quiet satisfaction of watching something grow. And oh, something was growing all right. But it wasn't pumpkins anymore. It was a plan. A big, fat, delicious plan. And when it bloomed, Karen wouldn't know what hit her. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long golden shadows over the empty soil. I could almost hear my granddad's voice rustling in the breeze. If you're gonna do it right. "Oh, don't worry, Grandad. I was going to do it exactly right." That was the moment I knew. Karen wasn't just going to regret stealing my pumpkins, she was going to regret ever stepping foot on my land. And so it began. The thing about revenge is, if you're going to cook it up, you better make sure it's seasoned just right. Karen had no idea who she was messing with. This wasn't a neighborly squabble over hedge height or mailbox colors. No, this was theft, betrayal, and pumpkin pie robbery. If she thought I'd just let it slide because she smiled through her teeth and called it a misunderstanding, well, bless her heart. She was in for a surprise bigger than the blue ribbon pumpkin she thought she'd stolen. I sat on the porch that evening, rolling a toothpick between my teeth, staring at the barren half of my patch. Karen loved her bake sales. Loved the praise. The spotlight. She wasn't just stealing produce, she was stealing glory. And in a town like ours, glory's as good as gold. But if there's one universal truth about small-town life, it's this. Folks will forgive a lot, but a gastrointestinal disaster at a public event? That sticks around longer than a bad tattoo. So, I started doing some research. Nothing sinister. Just food science. The internet, bless its chaotic heart, is full of things you shouldn't know but somehow do. Turns out, nature's got its own bag of tricks. I wasn't about to dump chemicals into a pie like some amateur. I needed something subtle. Something natural. Something that wouldn't change the taste or texture, but would hit like a freight train when the time came. After a few hours and one questionably deep dive into old folk remedy forums, I had my answer. A harmless-looking blend of all-natural ingredients. Stuff people used in old mountain recipes for cleansing, if you catch my drift. Karen and her bake sale guests wouldn't suspect a thing. But before I went full mad scientist, I needed to test it. I wasn't about to unleash chaos without knowing exactly what it would do. Enter, my cousin Earl. Earl's got a bad habit of showing up whenever I bake, hovering, taste testing, and offering advice I never asked for. So I whipped up a batch of mini pies, sprinkled in just the right amount of my secret blend, and waited. Right on cue, Earl dropped by, sniffed the air, and helped himself. He took one bite and declared it the best pumpkin pie I'd ever made. Then he devoured 2 more slices and left with the rest of the pan under his arm. An hour later I got the text. "What in tarnation did you put in that pie? I ain't left the bathroom since supper." Success. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. Not that I felt too bad. Earl's been borrowing my tools for years without returning a single one. Consider it even. With proof in hand, the plan was officially in motion. I knew the next step was getting Karen to take the bait. But Karen, being Karen, would never accept anything from me directly, too prideful for that. So I needed her to steal from me again. Luckily, she's as predictable as a rooster at sunrise. Over the next few days, I crafted the most mouth-watering, picture-perfect pumpkins you've ever seen. I arranged them along the roadside, just ripe enough, just abandoned enough, to look like they'd been forgotten by some careless farmer. Of course, I posted signs around them: private property, do not pick, and my personal favorite, pumpkins may bite. The kind of passive-aggressive messaging Karen couldn't help but ignore. I even left the gate mysteriously unlocked one evening. And wouldn't you know it? By morning, the decoy pumpkins were gone, clean cuts at the stems, fresh wheelbarrow tracks headed straight toward Karen's yard. I didn't need to check the night vision footage from the hidden camera in the old maple tree, but I did. And what a show. There she was, dressed like a bargain bin burglar in a tracksuit and garden gloves, sneaking through my patch like she was on a covert mission. Straining to lift each massive pumpkin, muttering to herself, "These'll be perfect." It would have been hilarious, if I wasn't still furious. Now that Karen unknowingly had her hands on my carefully selected decoy pumpkins, the final step was simple. I baked. Oh, I baked like I was preparing for the Last Supper. Pies, muffins, mini pumpkin hand pies, each one lovingly laced with my special blend. Nothing harmful, just effective. Subtle enough to avoid suspicion but powerful enough to guarantee results. I boxed them neatly, added a sweet little note. A peace offering for the bake sale. Enjoy. And that was that. Next morning, I strolled right up to Karen's door, smiling like the fool she always thought I was. She opened it, already decked out in one of her over-the-top fall aprons, looking torn between slamming the door and offering me lemonade. I held up the box and kept it casual. "Oh," she said, doing a poor job faking surprise. "Well, I suppose we can put them out at the sale. Nice of you to come around." "Anything for the community," I replied, tipping my hat. The look on her face when she closed the door? Priceless. Half smug, half suspicious. Back at the farm, I watched from a distance as the bake sale setup began. Karen was in full hostess mode, arranging tables, directing volunteers, placing my pies dead center on the display like they were the crown jewels. Judging by how she handled them, she hadn't taste tested a single one. Overconfident as always. Perfect. As the crowd rolled in, kids buzzing around with caramel apples, old folks swapping gossip under the tent, I leaned against my truck, sipping cider and watching the show unfold like a perfectly staged play. Karen was glowing, laughing and chatting like she was queen of the harvest, her table stacked with pumpkin pies, muffins, cookies, all stolen, all tainted, and all about to become legendary. The funny thing about chaos is you never quite know when it's going to hit. But when it does, you feel it, like the air thickening before a summer thunderstorm. The bake sale was peaking. Karen basked in the praise, flipping her hair, basking in the glory of my stolen pumpkins. And me? I just stood there, arms crossed, watching. The curtain was about to rise on Act 2. Normal folks took generous slices of pie, humming in approval as they chewed. And Karen, never one to miss a chance to be the center of attention, stood proudly behind her table, telling anyone within earshot that the pies were made from fresh local pumpkins, the best you can get. The nerve of her. Standing there, basking in praise, stealing not just my produce but my hard-earned title as the town's best baker, all while pretending it was some kind of charitable effort. I almost felt bad. Almost. The first signs showed up about 20 minutes in. Subtle at first. A kid tugged at his mom's sleeve, face twisted in discomfort. An old man shifted in his lawn chair like he'd bitten a lemon. Then came the whispers, someone asking where the nearest bathroom was, then someone else asking if there were more bathrooms because the one by the gazebo was already full. Karen, too busy soaking in her stolen glory, didn't even notice. But I did. Oh, I knew what was happening. As the minutes ticked by, so did the stomachs. By the 30-minute mark, the bake sale had transformed into a full-blown disaster. Adults were sprinting toward the portable toilets like they were handing out winning lottery tickets. Kids cried. Teenagers clutched their bellies. The line to the bathroom stretched past the cider stand and looped around the face-painting booth. It was a symphony of groans, gasps, and hurried footsteps. People ditched plates mid-bite, abandoning pastries like they were cursed. Then came the main event, Karen herself. Having proudly sampled her own pies, no doubt to impress the town council, she started to squirm behind her table. Fanning herself with a brochure, she excused herself mid-conversation and made her way across the field, only to realize the bathrooms were packed. The moment of horror on her face? Worth every ounce of effort I'd put into that recipe. She took off running like a spooked deer, tripping over a hay bale and landing face first in the grass. Gasps echoed around the field. Some folks tried to be polite, others stifled laughter, but I saw it. That telltale stain spreading across the front of her precious fall y'all apron. I stood there sipping my cider like it was the finest champagne. If Karen thought she could steal from me, humiliate me, and walk away unscathed, she clearly didn't know who she was messing with. The field had erupted into total chaos. The bounce house deflated when a frantic dad crashed into it, dragging 3 screaming kids as he bolted toward the woods. One of the mayor's aides was seen sprinting behind a row of pumpkins with a haunted look I'll never forget. And the mayor himself? Let's just say his keynote speech was tragically cut short when he doubled over mid-sentence and had to be escorted away by 2 equally distressed council members. Karen, apron ruined and hair askew, tried to save face. She wobbled to her feet, grabbed the microphone and chirped, "It's just a little excitement, part of the fun of." She didn't finish. Clutching her stomach, she dropped the mic and bolted for the parking lot, leaving behind her bake sale, her pride, and what little dignity she had left. By evening, the whole town wasn't buzzing about how delicious the pies were, they were talking about how the bake sale turned into the Great Pumpkin Purge. I figured it wouldn't be long before someone put the pieces together. And sure enough, later that night, my phone lit up with a video someone had posted online. Karen, pale-faced and apron-stained, sprinting across the field in slow motion. Dramatic violin music played underneath. Caption, #PumpkinKaren. It spread like wildfire. And as the sun dipped low behind the hills, I sat on my porch, rocking gently, cider in hand, and smiled. Justice had been served. And it tasted just like pumpkin. By the time the sun went down, the video had been shared by just about everyone in the Tri-County area. Folks were already joking about adding it to next year's fall festival lineup, the Great Pumpkin Dash, live reenactment. I could have left it there, let the meme do its work, let the internet chew her up, but this wasn't just about Karen losing clout. No, this was about to hit her where it really hurt, the HOA. Sure enough, 2 days later, a letter went out announcing an emergency board meeting. Karen, flustered and flailing, tried to spin the whole fiasco as an unfortunate flu outbreak, even pointed fingers at the poor cider vendor. But nobody was buying it. Too many folks had seen the sharp marks on the bottom of the pie tins. Too many knew they were my pumpkins. At the meeting, Karen stood before the board in full damage control mode, trying to salvage whatever scraps of her reputation were left. But it was no use. A tech-savvy teenager, probably one of the face-painting booth casualties, had edited together a highlight reel of the entire disaster, complete with slow-motion replays and snarky commentary. It played on the projector for everyone to see. Karen couldn't argue, couldn't charm, couldn't manipulate her way out this time, not with half the town glaring daggers and the other half choking back laughter. The HOA voted her out in record time. Karen tried to threaten legal action, but even her husband looked like he wanted to crawl under the folding table and disappear. It wasn't just a loss. It was a public exile. I sat in the back row, arms crossed, doing my best not to smile too wide. I didn't need to say a word. The footage, the chaos, the stains, they did all the talking for me. As I stepped out into the crisp autumn evening, the air never smelled so sweet. Revenge, as it turns out, isn't just best served cold. It tastes mighty fine baked into a pumpkin pie. A week after the now infamous bake sale disaster, the town had mostly moved on, but Karen's downfall had taken root like a dandelion in spring. Every diner conversation, every hushed chuckle outside the post office, every pumpkin spice latte at the local cafe came with a generous helping of gossip about the great pumpkin purge. Kids were reenacting Karen's panic dash across the bake sale grounds like it was a scene from a school play. Someone even printed t-shirts with a freeze frame of her horrified face and the words, "Fall Y'all 2025, printed underneath. I'd never seen anything catch fire in this town quite like this. I might have felt bad, if I hadn't spent the last 5 years living under Karen's reign of pettiness and passive aggression. But no, this wasn't guilt I was feeling. This was satisfaction. Pure, unfiltered, pumpkin spice satisfaction. That morning while I was out repairing the fence Karen had so graciously cut through, a beat-up sedan rolled into my driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust. Out stepped Karen. But she wasn't the same woman who used to strut around the neighborhood like a mall cop with a clipboard. She looked smaller, deflated, like a scarecrow after a storm. The wind could have knocked her over if it had a mind to. She walked up to the fence line, holding a plastic-wrapped fruitcake in both hands and wearing a strained smile, the kind you only put on when you know you've lost but aren't ready to admit it. I leaned on the post driver and waited. I wanted to apologize, she said, eyes darting everywhere but at me. I might have overstepped with the pumpkins. I didn't realize they were such a big deal. I let the silence stretch out, let it sit heavy in the air like morning fog. Karen shifted from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable. She thrust the fruitcake toward me like it might shield her from judgment. It's just a little something. Peace offering. The fruitcake sagged in its plastic wrap like even it knew it wasn't welcome here. I took it anyway. Partly because I knew it'd make her squirm. Partly because the pigs would probably enjoy it more than I ever could. Well, I said finally, giving her the kind of long, quiet look farmers are famous for, suppose I appreciate the gesture. I didn't. Not really. But I did appreciate watching Karen do what she'd never done before. Admit she was wrong, if only just a little. She gave a stiff nod, mumbled something about seeing herself out, and hurried back to her car, kicking up a trail of dust, and whatever scraps of dignity she had left. Later that afternoon I tossed the fruitcake to the pigs. They sniffed it like they were inspecting counterfeit bills, then after a long, suspicious pause, decided it was just acceptable enough to devour. I couldn't help but laugh. Even the pigs knew better than to trust Karen's baked goods. By morning the story had sprouted yet another branch. Word spread about Karen showing up at my doorstep and soon the town had turned it into a full-blown legend. Karen, humbled and desperate, pleading for forgiveness. I didn't correct them. Let the myth grow, I figured. A few days later the county fair arrived and for the first time in years, it wasn't overshadowed by HOA drama or Karen's overbearing bake sale booth. The air was crisp, the pies were honest, and the pumpkins on display? Every single one of them was mine. I walked through the fairgrounds lighter than I had in months, watching families enjoy the festival without a hint of tension in the air. Funny how a little justice, served warm and spiced just right, could settle the soul. When the pie contest rolled around, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to enter. After everything, did I really need to? But as I watched the town, my town, laughing, eating, living without Karen's shadow looming over them, I felt the nudge. I submitted my best pie yet, made from the few pumpkins she hadn't tainted. No tricks. No shortcuts. Just honest-to-goodness hard work. And when that blue ribbon was pinned to my entry, I knew this wasn't just about winning. It was about taking back what Karen had tried to steal. My pride. The best part wasn't even the ribbon. It was seeing Karen herself, lingering near the caramel apple stand, pretending to browse while very clearly watching the whole thing unfold. Her bake sale was a bust. The HOA had a new president now, a no-nonsense woman named Darlene, who wasted no time banning Karen from organizing so much as a potluck. And Karen? She didn't even have the nerve to enter anything in the fair this year. She just stood there, like a ghost at her own funeral, watching as I accepted the ribbon to a round of applause. Back at the farm, I put the prize money to good use, not on fancy equipment or a new truck like some folks suggested, but on a proper security fence. One that would light up like a Christmas tree if anyone so much as thought about sneaking in again. And just for fun, I built a scarecrow. Not just any scarecrow, this one wore a wig and apron and held a fake pie plate. A little petty? Sure. But some reminders are worth leaving. I positioned it right by the road, where Karen couldn't miss it every time she drove by. And so, life settled back into its rightful rhythm. The pumpkins grew, the pigs grunted, and the town never quite stopped laughing about the great pumpkin purge. Karen, stripped of her title and her bake sale crown, kept her distance. But every now and then, I'd spot her car creeping past the farm, her eyes flicking nervously toward the scarecrow. And I'd smile. There was peace now. For the moment. But I knew better than anyone, peace in this town is always temporary. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and painted the fields gold, I sat on the porch with a slice of my winning pie and a cup of cider. The whole ordeal had reminded me of one simple truth. You don't mess with a farmer's harvest and expect to get away with it. The land teaches patience. But it also teaches consequences. And Karen? Well, she learned that lesson the hard way. As I leaned back in my chair listening to the crickets sing, I glanced out at the pumpkin patch. The wind rustled through the fields, carrying a sound that almost felt like laughter, deep, knowing, satisfied. I could almost hear my granddad chuckling. If you're gonna do it right. And by my count, I sure as hell did. The end.